forgetting the microphone. Good morning, everyone. Attorney, business owner, and former Wisconsin Representative Adam Jarchow is my very special guest today, Wednesday, April 15th, 2020. I'm Ben Dryden. You're watching DrydenWire Live. Special thanks to our guests so far this week, Washburn County District Attorney Aaron Marco and Barron County Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald. If you've missed any of our live chats, we do at 8:30 on the weekdays every morning here on Facebook. You can watch a recording of those and all of our other chats on our website, DrydenWire.com, our YouTube channel, or on our Facebook page under our live videos tab. Reminder, tomorrow, Diane's Kitchen returns, and Diane will be chatting with Washburn County Health and Human Services Director Jim the Duke LaDuke. And then pop back here on Friday morning when I'll be chatting with mental health professional Darren Cox for our Feel Good Friday show. Don't want to miss that? All right. Enough of all that stuff. Let's see if we can get our guest on today. Where is he here? There you are, Mr. Adam Jarchow. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Days seem to be kind of just running together.
Yeah, how's quarantine?
Fine. I was telling a guest the other day that this really hasn't changed a whole lot for me. I'm at home. I go to work. I go home. I go to work. I'm not real big on socializing anyway. So this is great for me.
Well, it's not great for me. I own a bar, so that's no fun.
Yeah, you have several businesses. Have any of those... Actually, what are those businesses, and what are their status right now?
Well, it's rough, right? I mean, and I'm not complaining. I've got it just as good or bad, however, whatever your perspective is as the next person. But my wife and I own a campground with a little bar, and the bar's been closed now for a full month. We own a restaurant and event center, and that's been closed. We've been doing a little takeout, and we're actually going to start doing some more takeout here starting today. We got one of those fancy government loans to pay our employees for a few weeks. So
there it is.
In theory, the money will be there today. I guess we'll find out. And so we're going to bring back some employees and start doing some takeout and delivery and all that kind of good stuff. We'll see how that goes.
Oh, nice. And what city is that in?
That's in Balsam Lake, called Browtine.
Browtine. Oh, sure. And where can people go to find information about that? Just if they live in that area.
TheBrowtine.com.
Well, there you go.
Or our Facebook page. That's a lot of people get their information on the Facebook page, and my wife does a bang up job keeping that updated of what's going to be on the menu. It's been an interesting little month here.
Yeah. So about that, let's back up. So there's a lot of things I want to talk to you about. You're also an attorney, and I want to ask you about, have you been seeing more bankruptcy filings, small business stuff, obviously COVID stuff, but let's rewind like 2 weeks. The elections. Maybe it was a week and a half, almost 2 weeks, right? Where it was, I think Evas on a Friday announced a special session on Saturday, and then gavel in, gavel out, then Monday, blah, blah, blah. Everything happened that happened.
Right.
What were your thoughts about that entire process and how that worked?
It was incredibly disappointing, I thought. I just couldn't believe that that's what was happening all along through this process. If you'd read the public statements that the leaders of the legislature and the governor had put out, they'd all say, Governor Evas a few days before that said, democracy must go on. They issued kind of joint statements saying they're going to continue the election. And then Evas starts getting pounded in the national press for not moving the election. And, calls this special session for the Saturday before the election. And to their credit, in my opinion, the legislative leaders said, we're not going to move an election 3 days before the election happens. There's no reason to do that. And then the Monday before, right, the election's on a Tuesday, and the day before, at noon, an executive order comes out purporting to move it. And within 4 hours, the Supreme Court had said, hey, man, you don't have the authority to just move an election. And thank goodness. Because I think even if you're a liberal or a Democrat and you can't stand Donald Trump, what would you think if the Monday before the November election, Donald Trump said, hey, I was just kidding. We're having an election now in February, and I'm going to stay on for a while. We can't let governors or presidents just move elections around. That's insane.
Yeah. So not from a Republican or a Democrat point of view, just from the process itself, why did this happen at the 11th hour?
Well, my opinion is that Evers started getting some national press. If you look back to the stories that started getting written on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday before the election happened, they all were saying, "Why is Wisconsin going through this election? Why hasn't Governor Evers canceled this election?" And believe it or not, politicians respond to pressure, right? They're all of them for the most part are kind of, stick their finger in the wind and do their best to follow along with where the public sentiment is. And I think that's what happened there more than anything. So there's a lot of conspiracy theories about trying to steal the election and la 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 la. And I don't think it was anything nearly that nefarious. I think he just started feeling the pressure from the national press.
Yeah. So, excuse me. So when they gavelled in and gavelled out, come to find out, politics are very political. Was this a power move on Democrats or Republicans in what happened after that he called for this special session?
I don't think it really was on either part, actually. And I think had this really started, if this conversation would have started maybe 3 weeks before the election, and Evers would have sat down with Robin Vos and Scott Fitzgerald and said, "Hey, look, I really think we need to move this election. We need the legislature to act. Here's my proposal. Can we work something out? I think this is dangerous. Here's the data." I served in the legislature with Robin, and all leaders get a bad rap from the other side, right? They all think that for whatever reason, if we disagree with people now, they're evil. Well, I don't think Robin's evil any more than I think Tony Evers is evil, right? I disagree with Tony Evers sometimes, and I disagree with Robin sometimes. But I think they would have said, okay, if the data shows that this is going to be a problem, here's a way forward. I think the legislature would have taken a look at doing that. But we can't just let a governor without legislative approval or a president without congressional approval start moving elections around. That is an incredibly dangerous precedent to set.
So do you think that when he called to suspend the elections on that Monday, so the day before the actual elections, he must have known full well, right, that this isn't going to, it's not going to stay. So do you think that he felt that it was, hey, we got a shot at this. It's worth a shot. Or I knew it wasn't going to pass, but I just wanted to say it.
We've got, at the moment, we've got a 5-2 court. Dan Kelly just lost, so in August it'll be a 4-3 kind of conservative liberal split on the court. So I suspect that they had some idea that the court might not view this in the light most favorable to Tony Evers, but there have been no cases on any of these election or executive orders that have been happening up until that case. So I think both sides were kind of not sure what the court was going to do. So I think he gave it his best shot and failed. I don't know. What was your view? You hear from people all around the state. What did you hear?
Confusion. No kidding.
Yeah.
Just that was the only part. I don't care about that stuff. I care about the why, I guess. Politicians and people that are very far right or very far left, they're like the Sith. That they speak in absolutes. That we're right all the time and you guys are wrong, and if you are one of those people, then we don't like you at all. I don't like that stuff. But just kind of looking at it, whether it was social media, we had fielded I can't tell you how many emails and questions and messages we sent. Is the election still on today? On the day of the election?
Right.
Like, yes, it's still on. So I think it actually just created a lot of confusion, and I think it just turned everything very political. Because a week before that, there wasn't anger, or I didn't see anything, even like on social media, of Democrats very upset with Republicans or vice versa. It wasn't until this started happening, then everybody started, now it was everything you saw on Facebook and on Twitter now it's all political again. It's like, come on, why are we doing this right now? This should have been done 3 weeks ago.
You have to admit, I don't know if it was in the back of their mind or not, but Tony Evers and the Democrats came out huge winners on that deal. The pictures out of Milwaukee, that the media splashed all over the news all across the country, just made Republicans look awful.
Yeah.
And, it is what it is. That's what happens sometimes. But Evers certainly won the PR war on that one.
I think so. I think you may be even referring to, I saw everywhere, especially on Twitter, Robin Vos with a mask and all this gear on.
Right.
And and I think he issued a statement like either that day or the next day that this is what everybody was required to wear. It wasn't like his own brought from home or anything.
Yeah.
But that's
no. It was unfortunate, right? Because Robin kind of put his money where his mouth is. So did Robin's wife. They agreed to go be poll watchers or election officials, whatever you want to call it. And that was what they required those poll watchers to wear, and it kind of backfired. And it's unfortunate. I think the whole thing was unfortunate. To me, democracy and the election are way too important for these kind of political games. And, deciding who's going to sit on our Supreme Court is pretty dang important. And to do this to it was really unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's just too bad.
Yeah. Did you see the Assembly pass the COVID-19 relief bill yesterday? I think it goes to the Senate today. What are your views on that?
I don't know.
All right. Good talk.
Yeah. It's kind of,
I don't know.
You look at what they did, and it's like, really, this is what's important. There are some things that are important. I think in the CARES Act, Wisconsin got $2 billion, so we had to do some things to make sure that we got that money and that it went through Medicaid and went through the unemployment system. But it was all sort of, and we got rid of the 1 week waiting period for unemployment and some other things. But to me, it was kind of like, moving checkers around the checkers board. It really wasn't momentous at all. I think what needs to be momentous is we need Republicans to start talking about, how long are we going to have this state shut down? How long are we going to have businesses out of business? How long are we going to, allow people to allow our state to have double-digit unemployment? How long is this going to happen, particularly in northern and western Wisconsin, where we've had 0 deaths in the northwestern region? That's what Republicans need to start talking about. That's what they need to start looking at, because we are, before too long, going to be in a Great Depression. And do you think Donald Trump's going to get reelected in a Great Depression? If you're just a Republican and you really like Donald Trump and you want him to get reelected, or you want Republicans to do well, I don't think he's going to get reelected in a Great Depression. So it's time for their own political survival for Republicans to start speaking up and saying enough of this nonsense.
Yeah. Actually, I have something printed here. It's in our I think our Wisconsin links on our website, DrydenWire.com. This is from, I don't remember who it was, but it's AP story, but it's from KSTP TV, that Governor Evers signaled Tuesday that it may be another month before he starts relaxing social distancing mandates. The governor's stay-at-home order and school closures are set to expire on the 24th. Lifting the mandates won't be like flipping a switch. He said he wants to be sure more coronavirus testing is available, there's better tracking of sick people, and there's enough personal protective gear for healthcare workers before he'll consider allowing businesses to open and easing social distancing restrictions, adding that it's unlikely schools will reopen, but he hasn't made a decision. And the last part here, quote, I would fully expect another couple of weeks, a month, before we are in a position to actually say we're ahead of the curve here and that we can start thinking about how we can relax things. What do you think about that?
I think it's BS. I think it's awful. If you think back to a month ago, and it feels like a year ago now, but it's only a month. So when all of this started, what were we doing? Why were we flattening the curve? What was the driver to keep hospitals from being overwhelmed? You got any hospitals in Spooner that are overwhelmed there, Ben?
I can't speak for them, but I actually was just there on Sunday for something else, so I think it was fine.
Was it a war zone? Did it look like the picture?
I think I was the only person there, to be honest.
And, I laugh about it, but that's actually a real issue in a lot of our small hospitals. They're being decimated because they're not getting any of their normal revenue. And so you're seeing doctors being furloughed and laid off. I mean, this is incredibly bad for our small hospitals.
I never looked at it that way. Actually, I never even considered they're probably losing out a lot of things, because hospitals provide so much more nowadays. It's not just like an ER room. They have so many other programs that they have that they can't do right now, and I didn't think about that. They rely on a lot of that income.
One of their profit centers is elective surgeries, and they're not doing any of that. And so I've talked to some folks at hospitals where their revenue is down 90%. It's totally unsustainable. So the idea was we're going to save our hospitals from being overwhelmed. And ironically, what we're actually doing is destroying our hospitals. It's incredible. And so the idea that this is going to go on for a few more weeks is absurd. I think there'll be lawsuits that get filed this week or next week that start really pushing back on this. And if it continues, I think you're going to, if you just keep an eye on how people's sort of state of mind is on social media, it is incredible the pushback that is starting now. I think people are starting to look at this and say, all right, you know what? We all did our part. It is time to go back to
Yeah.
work. This is enough.
Yeah. Hey, so this is embarrassing. I didn't get my coffee over there, but we're live. So, just talk for a minute.
You want me to do a soliloquy about the First Amendment? So yesterday, I'm going to talk about the Raleigh Police Department. Did anybody see what the Raleigh Police Department tweeted out yesterday? They had some protesters protesting this thing, and there was people talking about the protesters on social media. And the Raleigh Police Department put on Twitter, "Protesting is not essential." Can you believe that? That we'd have
I wasn't
police
here. What
department
was
in America saying that protesting is non-essential. It was the most amazing tweet that I've ever seen a law enforcement officer do.
I didn't see that. I didn't see
Yeah,
that.
it was unbelievable. People all were like, "Well, you've heard of the First Amendment, right, guys?"
Well, there's that little thing.
Right.
What grade would you give Governor Evers, not just overall, but just for his handling of this?
You know, I don't know. I wouldn't give him an F, but I wouldn't give him, I don't know, a D. And part of it is at the beginning when we started doing this, the communication was so horrific and the leadership was so horrific. If you watch Tim Walz, who I disagree with as well in Minnesota, and his leadership and how he's explaining these things and how he's walking through these things, at least there's some leadership. Governor Evers bounces back and forth day to day, minute to minute sometimes on what he's doing. And he tweets these things out like everybody's just sitting around refreshing their Twitter feed to find out what they're allowed to do in life. And that's just not how things work. I mean, when he closed down the restaurants, literally the day before he closed them down, he said he wasn't going to do it. And so we have restaurants across the state on St. Patrick's Day preparing their corned beef and cabbage, sitting on the stove, hundreds, thousands of dollars worth of food. Then at 2:00 that day, he said, "Oh, guess what? You're closed at 5." Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That is horrific leadership.
Yeah, and I see a lot of restaurants, in this example, that they were doing a lot of free food and bring your family. This is before the social distancing. But and first, that's great for them to do. But I talked to some of those businesses, and they said, well, not only we wanted to help, but also we have a ton of food that we're going to have to throw out now. So we might as well give it away because it's either that or it just goes in the garbage. But I have heard a lot of that when reasonable, logical people look at this whole situation and say, I'm glad that Evers did what he did. Protection and safety of our citizens is, it's obviously vital. But boy, a little more transparency, a little more heads up, a little more planning ahead. And I get that this is all new for all of us. But you're the governor's office, and this isn't against Tony Evers. I don't care who's sitting in there. It's, making these decisions just one day, and then the next day it's a different decision, and that impacts so many people's lives and businesses. And just give us a little heads up, a little warning, because again, you own a business, and I don't know who you go through, like Cisco or something, and you place your food order and all your other orders. One day, and the next day you're shut down.
Yeah. No, it was incredibly difficult, and I thought that's been sort of emblematic of how this has gone for Governor Evers. So I kind of dump on him, but I also have to say I dump on not only the legislature as well. I don't think they've performed particularly well in this.
Oh yeah, what grade would you give the specifically the Republican legislator?
Yeah, maybe a C. Not much better than Tony Evers, and here's why. Right, so in our system, we depend on checks and balances. We depend on the legislature to check the executive. We depend on the judiciary to be a check. We depend on the states to check the feds. We depend on the opposition parties to check each other. And mostly Republicans have just been quiet and have been go along to get along. And I'm going to talk about why I think that has happened. But no matter why it's happened, in a time like this where civil liberties have been absolutely crushed, where businesses have been crushed, all by one, chief executive. And granted, it's happened in every state or most states with Republican and Democrat governors, so it's not a partisan thing. But at a time when the chief executive are making these decisions that have such wide impact, the opposition party and the legislature have a duty to step in, and I don't think they've done much to step in. And I'll tell you the reason why. It's because of the public. and I give the public the worst grade.
Oh.
I give the public an F,
Oh.
an F minus.
Nice.
And here's why: we as free people, and this is the way our Constitution reads. We give the government some opportunity, some power, and what is that power for? To protect liberty, to protect the freedoms that we have. And what has happened is just the opposite here, and people mostly have just been perfectly fine with it. I am shocked by the number of people who have willingly surrendered their civil liberties, who have willingly just said, "I'm fine with this. This is fine." There was yesterday something that was on the DHS, Wisconsin Department of Health website, about how many people have died from this deal in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
You know how many people in Wisconsin have died that are under 30?
I saw that numbers yesterday. I can't remember.
0, not 1, 0. And so, we are essentially destroying our liberties, destroying our economy, and we're all good with it. When did this happen? What happened to the American spirit, to freedom, to liberty? And so, until the public start telling legislators by phone calls and emails, hey, you guys need to do something here. You need to open this economy back up. The legislators have no reason to actually do that. And so I think the reason that both the governor and the legislature have been so bad is because the public's been so bad. They've been so scared by the media and so afraid of this virus. And I'm not minimizing it. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
But there are things that we can do to mitigate it without destroying our economy.
So state parks, a lot of those were closed down, like 40 of them or something, but they weren't, around here. And there's some state parks around here, but not a lot of them in Northwest Wisconsin. Give us some insight on how this stuff works, because you were a legislator in Madison. Is it possible to, like what he has done with the... Do you need to get your phone?
No, I think somebody else here will get it.
Okay, that's fine. Is it possible to, like this Safer at Home, is it possible to have that certain parts of the state have a different application to it? Or is this has to be a statewide thing?
Yeah, so my biggest complaint about this whole thing has been that it's kind of like a 6-year-old saying, meh, this is what we're going to do, and that's it. Of course, that's not what we can walk and chew gum. We can look at the data and say, hey, in northwestern Wisconsin, we have hardly any cases. We should do something a little bit different there than like in Milwaukee, where there's a hot spot, or Dane County, or Green Bay has a little bit of a hot spot. So there is absolutely a way that we can sort of work through this either region by region or county by county. And that is what the governor, in my opinion, ought to be doing right now, with the help of the legislature, right? Get buy-in from these guys. If my biggest complaint about both the legislature and the governor is they don't talk to each other. They never talk. It's like they despise each other. Sit down and come up with a plan that everyone can agree on, that, okay, if you've got less than, pick a number, 30 cases in your region, here's what the rules are going to be. If you have, and here's when you can start opening up, and put a plan together so that businesses can start to plan. You mentioned Cisco. If you're a restaurant, you can't just snap it back on tomorrow, right, and open up. Right. You have to order food. And guess what? If you're a restaurant, you probably owe Cisco money for the last food orders that you've got before you got shut down. You think Cisco's going to deliver food to you?
Maybe tough.
You owe them money? No, you got to pay them, right? And you got to bring your employees back, and you got to turn your garbage back on, and you got to turn your propane back on, or your natural gas. All this stuff that you shut off, you have to start opening back up. And this idea, if Tony Evers one day just says, oh yeah, tomorrow we're open, it will be equally as bad as him saying the day before we closed, oh yeah, tomorrow you're closed. Yeah. It's nonsense. There is a way to do this in a smart, logical way that protects the most vulnerable, who we now know for sure, right, are the old, elderly, and sick. How do we protect those folks and still protect the livelihoods of 30, 40, and 50-year-olds?
Well, and right now, I think, and let me know what you see on social media or what you hear from people in your area, that there seems to be two main sides to this right now. The people who are talking about businesses and the impacts that it's having on them. And I kind of think that is being thrown into the Republican column. And then this is smart, and businesses will figure it out, get a loan. We need to make sure that we, extend the Safer at Home order for like another month. And that seems to fall in more in the Democratic column. Do you agree with that? And if not, or if you do, why is it being separated that way?
I don't know. It's really awful that all of a sudden, whether we should have an economy or not is a partisan thing.
And
Are
that's
you
what I'm
kidding me?
saying. Is like it's turned into that now. When it's
It's
what
absurd. I
this is,
mean,
we can do
Democrats
both.
have jobs. Yeah, Democrats have jobs. Democrats own businesses. Republicans have grandparents that they don't want to see die from this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that this is somehow turned partisan is absurd. The idea that my Democrat friends, who are huge, most of them are huge civil libertarians, right? They believe strongly in, the First Amendment. They don't believe in the Second Amendment, but they believe in the Fourth
Well, yeah,
Amendment.
one of them.
So, but usually they believe in these
Yeah,
things, and it's like,
sure.
come on, guys, we're okay now that you can't protest, that you can't assemble, that you can't get together to engage in political activity. That's okay now to half the population. That can't possibly be right. That can't possibly be. This can't possibly be as partisan as it appears to be on social media.
And
There's
that's
just no way.
I know, but that's just what I'm saying. It is, and I don't get it.
I don't get it either.
I don't understand, man, at all. Hey, what grade would you give Donald Trump through all this? Because Donald Trump is obviously a president and whatever, but let's face it, he's kind of depending on what day. I mean, you were talking about Evers that one day he does this and next day this. I mean, that's kind of our president right now too, right? So, what grade would you give him?
Yeah, I'd give him no better than a C. I mean, and I think he was doing okay up until here recently, where when he starts saying, as president, I'm going to, my power is total.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, no,
not a smart move, but
I mean, come on, man. One of the primary reasons why I'm a Republican or a conservative is because I don't trust any member of the government, from the president down to the city council. I don't trust any of those guys. And the reason I don't trust any of those guys is because once you get power, it can be abused.
What?
And so we have these checks and balances. And if you're a Republican and all of a sudden you're okay with the president saying, my power is total or absolute, come on. It's just BS.
yeah, that's a bad look. I mean, it just is.
It is.
Come
It's
on,
terrible.
man. So you're also
Now, I will say that he catches a lot of flack from the press. That is unfair that, President Obama didn't catch and Bill Clinton didn't catch. I mean, you can't possibly watch this stuff and think that the press is fair.
He doesn't play nice.
He still hasn't performed all that
I
well
know. He doesn't play nice with them, and they treat him accordingly.
Right.
But you're right. But having said that, he does do some stupid things, and he just does. Again, kind of going back to the absolute thing. He's not perfect. Evers isn't perfect. There's things that they're doing well, and there's things that maybe they aren't doing super well. I give Evers a lot of leeway here, a lot of rope, I guess, because this is a new thing for all of us. So I get that part. So on that note, if you were advising Governor Evers right now, what would you tell him about when to lift this order? Should the 24th be finished? And then we're back. When do we announce? If it's going to be later than the 24th, what are we on now? The 15th? When should he announce this? What advice would you give him?
So I would say no later than the end of this week, there should be a plan in place that's released to the public on a staged reopening. And so what that would look like are again, in places like northwestern Wisconsin, where we have almost no cases, almost back to normal. Now, we would still include social distancing rules. We would still include rules with people who are sick. We would still include rules for washing hands and touching face and all of those kind of things that we know are important. And we would monitor it carefully to make sure that we don't see some sort of spike. And that's how that would happen in a place like northwestern Wisconsin, where we have very few cases. Mm-hmm. In Milwaukee, I think you take a different approach, right? And it goes a little bit slower. And we, maybe have to have the restaurants have a little bit more buy-in. But if I'm Tony Evers, I put that plan together at the table with Robin Vos and Scott Fitzgerald. And I get the legislature to buy in. Because the worst part about all of this is having one person under what I think are very, very tenuous statutory authorities for him. I think he's way out on a limb, and I suspect that if this continues, the courts will get involved and show him just how far out on a limb he's been. But so he should work with the legislature, get buy-in for a reopening plan. And I think once you have that and the legislature has worked with him, then most people will buy in. Republicans will start buying in more. But if he just keeps doing this the way that he's doing it all on his own, you're going to start seeing Republicans across the state continue to say, I'm not for this, I'm against this. And it makes it more and more partisan, more and more difficult to implement.
Do you think that Voss and Fitzgerald would entertain that? Or do you think it's political for them and going, if you come to us and ask for help, we're not going to help you because we're Republicans, you're a Democrat, and that's just how it goes?
No, it's not how it works at all. I mean, look at the bill that passed yesterday, 97-2 out of the state assembly. Yeah. And I would expect it's probably going to be unanimous out of the state Senate today. There is absolutely a hunger for a lot of members of the legislature, regardless of what the media says, Democrat and Republican, there's a hunger for them to work together.
Yeah.
And the media likes to stoke this sort of partisan infighting. But, if you've ever sat on the floor of the legislature, you know that there's a parlor in the back room, and the Republicans and the Democrats sit there and have lunch together. Now, they'll go and beat each other up on the floor and then come back and have lunch together. I mean, Republicans and Democrats, essentially want mostly the same things in a little bit of a different way. So the idea that they can't work together to figure out how to do a staged reopening of the state is absurd. Of course they can.
Sure. Do you think this is Evers not asking Voss and Fitzgerald, or do you think this is something that Voss and Fitzgerald, is it one of those things maybe that nobody wants to be the one to make the first move? Is that what this is?
I don't know. It seems to me that relationship is very damaged, and we can place blame on why it's damaged, but it's been damaged for a very long time. But at the end of the day, if we're going to trust the governor to be the leader, then the governor has to lead, and the governor has to reach out the way Tommy Thompson used to legislators and have them in the office and get buy-in. That's why Tommy was so successful.
Going back on what you had said about what you would like to see happen by the end of this week, but you were talking about Northwest Wisconsin and maybe Milwaukee have a little pushed out timetable and plan this a little better. Do you think that is likely going to happen where when we do, because we will at some point, slowly come out of this, is it going to be statewide, just like the Safe at Home order was issued for everyone? Or do you think this will be regional or other situations and unique scenarios?
Yeah, my strong suspicion is the governor's going to extend the orders and people are going to end up filing lawsuits and the court is going to start striking things down. And the reason that I think that is the worst way to do it is because that just means that it's a one-size-fit-all, right? The courts are not in the business of fashioning kind of nuanced policy. And so the court will look at, one of these orders or one provision of these orders or two or three provisions and say, no, that's unconstitutional or you don't have the statutory authority, and it's struck down. And so I think that's the risk that Tony Evers is really running here by not engaging in a staged reopening with the legislature, is that it's going to be struck down. Now, from a political standpoint, Tony might say, that's fine, because then it's on the court, right? If we get a spike or people get sick, I'm not to blame, the court is, or the Republicans are. But that's not good government. Good government is, I got elected, and my job is to do what's best for the people of the state. Come hell or high water, I'm going to do that. And I just don't see that out of really either of them at the moment.
You're an attorney for, what is your main practice?
I mostly do business transactional work, some commercial real estate. So I draft contracts, help businesses buy and sell.
Do you do anything with
wills and estates.
Do you do anything like with bankruptcy stuff? Help business with that?
Yeah, well, we haven't for a long time because we haven't had to. We've had a good economy, but I used to do quite a bit of it.
Have you seen in the last, month, a few weeks, something, an uptick, or is it upkick, whatever?
Yeah, we have
an increase.
We haven't actually filed any, but I've been getting a lot of calls from business owners that are really struggling, and they're trying to figure out, is bankruptcy the right path for me? Is there something else? And oftentimes, if you catch it at the front end, you can do some good planning to make it so that you don't actually have to go through the bankruptcy process. But what I saw during the Great Recession, and I assume what will happen here, is business owners in particular, are optimistic by nature. So they think we're going to be okay, we're going to come out of this. They'll borrow against their 401k, they'll take out home equity loans, they'll do anything to stay afloat. And one day they just are going to run out of money. And then that's when they're going to say, okay, I guess I really need to file now. And that's too bad, because now they've depleted their retirement. They've taken exempt money that could have been protected in bankruptcy, and they've spent it. It's terrible. It's just an awful situation.
Every time I post something on Facebook, on our Facebook page, post a link to a story or whatever, Facebook now brings up this little thing that says you should, click here to add a donate button to a nonprofit, and don't worry, we'll find the nonprofit for you. You just click the button and it sets it up. And I'm not being insensitive to nonprofits, because I get it. Nonprofits are probably hurting too. Whatever. But I'm actually a little more concerned about the for-profit businesses.
Right.
Like, I kind of want to donate to them right now. I mean, and essentially, that's what a lot of us are doing, right? By just ordering more. Well, we ordered like $70 worth of pizza, I think last Friday or something, from a local pizza place. And we just because if we're going to order, let's order a whole bunch. I mean, obviously, it took us like 3 days to go through it all. But in a weird way, that's kind of what we're doing to try to help these small businesses. But again, I really do believe that the small business, this is, I don't know, I really hope that we have a plan in place, that something is going to, at least from a transparency, at least from a here's what we're doing. Like, I don't understand why we don't even know what's going on right now. It's just you listen to an update and it's like, okay, we're still working on it. It's okay. What's wrong with just letting us know something? Anything.
Right. No, we're a month in, and this is the time when people run out of money, right? If you're a small business owner, you've got a couple of employees, and you happen to work at that business. It's not just an investment. You work at that business, so that's your income. You've probably blown through most of your savings by now. People just think you can turn it off, and you've laid employees off, so you're good. You still have to make your mortgage or your rent payment, and some of those have been deferred, and that's been helpful. But that deferral is going to run out. And by the way, most banks and landlords that have deferred, that doesn't mean that it gets tacked on to the end, right? That just means that your payment when you come out of that is going to be higher.
Yeah.
Your utilities you still have to pay. You have to keep your freezers on if you're at a restaurant. I mean, there's all kinds of just overhead operating expenses, not to mention just the day-to-day expenses of living. So these people are just unbelievably hurting right now.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a time when we have so many people hurting and so many people saying, whatever. We got to, we got to protect the sick. It just seems to me that there's this kind of disconnect where people have just said, well, too bad, we have to protect the sick. And that's true. We do have to protect people, but we are so far on the other side that we're going to see human suffering and misery on a huge scale if we don't get this right.
And that's why I'm really hoping that you are right, that by the end of the week, Evers should be releasing something, giving us something, kind of an idea of where we're going.
That's what I would want him to do. I don't think there's any chance in the world.
But what do you think he's going to do and when?
I think he's going to extend it, and probably not till next week.
School's not going back in session, is it?
This is another place where I've been really upset with the governor, because he always says we have to follow science, right? So the CDC guidelines, and I'm not making this up, go to the CDC website. The CDC guidelines specifically say don't close schools unless there's community spread. How many counties in Wisconsin have had community spread? Almost none. And we have the schools closed anyway. So actually, by closing the schools, we're not following science. And that irritates me. I think, and we're depriving all of these kids. I mean, I read an article yesterday about what this is doing to kids and that we don't really notice it. But one day we just said, okay, your life is over. You're at home now. You have no friends, no school, no activities, no sports. This is horrific for kids. And for what? What the CDC says we shouldn't have some of these schools closed.
Right.
And so we are damaging people in a way that will affect them for the rest of their lives over this. And all I hear from the people that have a different view of this is, well, better safe than sorry. I don't think that's the case. I think the cure is worse than the disease at this point.
Well, I think it's important to, like most things, like I've lived my whole life in the gray area. And sometimes that doesn't it doesn't end well for me by doing it that way. But it's usually that compromise. There's something in the middle. On almost everything, it's, okay, that's just too extreme one way or the other. There's usually something in the middle. Mm-hmm. And I think this is one of those situations where, again, if they can figure that out, I think you're right, that if Evers, if the governor and if the legislature, if the Voss and Fitzgerald, this is one of those times we want to see you do this, and you both get political points for it. So there's no downside. Sure. You both just have, in the greater interest of health and greater interest of businesses and for the betterment of Wisconsin, we're all going to get political points by working together on this one. There's just no downside to this at all.
Right.
But
no, I totally agree with that. Yeah. I think that there will be people like me who are probably a little bit more on the side of let's just open this thing back up and let's get going and let the chips fall where they may. And there are people on the other side who say we should not open, for 18 months until we have a vaccine.
Right.
Those, on those two kind of, ends of the spectrum, probably whatever the compromise would not make either one of those happy. But guess what? My end of the spectrum is like 10%, and the other end of the spectrum is like 10%. There's 80% of the people in this state who would be made happy by these guys working together.
I agree. And what really worries me, oh, shoot, I forgot to put this up. So I had Chris Fitzgerald on yesterday, the Barron County Sheriff, and I talked about this report that showed in Wisconsin, 32% of people during the Safer at Home that are working from home are day drinking, basically, drinking while they're working. And then I saw a meme that it showed that like their concern is, 20 years from now, with our kids now being home, the leaders of our country and our state in 20 years from now are going to basically, be taught by, drunk idiots. Because,
I never thought that I would see the day in Wisconsin where bartenders were deemed non-essential and lawyers were deemed essential. it's like somehow we've walked through the looking glass.
Yeah.
Here. It's just incredible. Wait a second, this is Wisconsin and bartenders are not essential? That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's a crazy time, man. It just absolutely is. What else? Is there anything else you want to talk about that we didn't get a chance to?
What do you think about the election? We just had a huge election. What did you think about it?
I was surprised that Kelly lost. I mean, it wasn't that close. I was surprised by that. Not necessarily that he lost, but just what it was. What is like 55-45 or something, lost by, I don't know, a couple 100,000 votes. I was a little surprised. I was really interested to see, because obviously we have this election coming up May 12th, Tiffany Zunger, for the 7th Congressional District. I was interested because I wanted to see, right now we have Donald Trump, who isn't sucking, right? I mean, if you're a Republican anyway, it's like, yeah, he's doing fine. And they have Evers that did what he did with the Safer at Home, and there's been some controversy to it. But again, I was kind of just looking at what are these numbers going to mean when they come out in the election. Are Democrats going to be more victorious or Republicans, and what does that insight mean? And I know you and I talked about that just a little bit offline. Before I get into it, I want to ask you, when you looked at those numbers, what did that tell you? Just the overall numbers.
Yeah, so I actually wasn't all that surprised that Kelly lost. I mean, it was a huge butt kicking, but I'm gonna tell you a political secret, Ben.
Oh,
you ready?
Hold on.
Here's the big political secret for the day.
Okay.
Politics ain't beanbag, and so if you're involved in politics at all, you're interested in your side winning, right?
Right.
That's kind of how
it works.
Operate.
Right.
So after Tony Evers got elected in November of 2018, what did the Republicans do? And I was part of this. I was in the legislature. So if you're a Democrat, you hate me for this. We had a lame duck session.
Oh, right.
And we started ratcheting back some executive powers. Now, I will say I was in favor of doing that when Scott Walker was governor, because I think the legislature has given the governor far too much authority, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat. One of the other things we talked about is moving the presidential primary that we just had so that it wasn't on the same day as our local elections. Because what happens when one party has its primary and the other party doesn't have a primary or has a non-challenged primary? The turnout for the one party is going to be extraordinary, and they're going to swamp everything else. And we knew what would happen is Dan Kelly was going to get swamped by this Democrat primary. And that's exactly what happened. Out of the 1.5 million votes, something like 900,000 voted in the Democrat primary. So there is no way that Dan Kelly, if he was the greatest candidate in the history of the world and ran the greatest campaign in the history of the world, there's no way that he could overcome that kind of turnout on the Democrat side.
Bizarre.
And so it's not surprising that he lost. What's surprising is that we as Republicans back then didn't move the dang presidential primary so that we could have this standalone election and not have Dan Kelly get swamped by the presidential primary. Instead, what we could have had was a sort of a standalone of the local elections and the statewide Supreme Court election, and a different day for the presidential primary.
What would be the pushback on that? Is that either a constitutional thing, which I can't imagine it would be, at least in my mind, or would it be more of it's just logistically and the cost, because now, a separate election?
it was mostly whiny Senate Republicans who were squishy and didn't want to get yelled at by their clerks for having another election. So honestly,
yeah,
there's
sure.
a handful of whiny Senate Republicans who, consistently make this. If you're not a partisan like I am, you'll say, well, that's good that they wouldn't do that to the clerks and all of that. But for me, it was incredibly frustrating knowing that we were going to lose. Almost certainly going to lose one of the best Supreme Court justices that we had. I mean, he's a freedom fighter. He's my kind of Supreme Court justice, and it's really hard to watch us lose that because we had some squishy Senate Republicans who wouldn't go along with moving that election.
Yeah, well, I think most people, and I guess I can't speak for them, but I would just assume that any logical, rational, reasonable person would want to vote for someone. You'd want the person to win because it's a vote between two people. And that's it. There were no other factors there. Now, I know this is like in a dream world.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want that? Now, I get it. It may put more on the...
We have come to the place in Wisconsin where we are so divided politically that even a Supreme Court election, everybody takes their sides and you say, this is the Republican candidate, right? This is the Democrat candidate, even though technically it's nonpartisan.
Well, yeah.
We know the candidate that's more conservative or whatever, and we know the candidate that's more liberal. And it's unfortunate because the courts should, in theory, that would not be how we looked at the courts, but it kind of is, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. It is. Hey, we should do this again sometime.
Hey, man, I'm in.
Awesome. If your phone's ringing, you're that business, wherever wherever you are right now, must be doing well.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, I don't care.
I'll take the phone out of the office. It's people calling to file bankruptcy.
Oh, that's harsh. All right, cool. Right. Well, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. No kidding. Man. Let's do this again in a couple of weeks because we have that election coming up. Oh, real quick. Do you think that the May 12th election is going to be on? Or if it is going to be on, are they going to – they're going to be what? Everyone votes absentee ballot?
I need to get a crystal ball, right? So
yeah, that'd be nice.
These predictions. My prediction.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. Don't let me forget that. That's what we're going to do the next time you're on. We're going to have a segment in it, like your bold predictions. So then the next time you come on, we can see if those things are true. So go ahead.
Yeah. My prediction is Tony Evers will try to move that election. I think he has more potential authority to move this election because it's a special election that he set. As opposed to the election that we just had that was set pursuant to the statutes. Mm-hmm. That said, there was a case not too long ago when Governor Walker wasn't calling a special election in a timely manner where the court said, you have to call that election. And it's been now 6 months since we've had a member of Congress in northern Wisconsin. I think there's a possibility that the court will say, no, we're not delaying that again. But my sense is Tony Evers will try to move it, and I don't know where the court will go. I think it's a closer question on this one. It'll be really interesting.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that next time.
Good deal.
All right, cool, man. Special thank you to my guest today, attorney, business owner, and former Wisconsin Representative Adam Jarchow. And thank all of you for watching. We'll see you right back here tomorrow morning for a Diane's Kitchen, no, it's not a cooking show, chat as Diane will be visiting with Washburn County Health and Human Services Director Jim the Duke LeDuc. So until then, stay safe, keep your social distance, and have a blessed day.